I started using this task tracker at work, and it led to a $10,000 raise and my boss thinking I'm the most organized person in the company. What you see here is the continuous flow task tracker that I actually use at work. But a lot of you said that you can't use Google at work and asked for an Excel alternative, so here you go. In column B, we have our task type, so you can use the drop down to select different types of tasks. In column C, you'll put details around the task to remind yourself what to do later. The status should always start with not started, and then you'll select your priority. Just to the right, you can add a link, and then to the right of that, you can add your task focus to show what part of your job this task is related to. Just to the right of that is our value add column, and that's where you put how this task brings value to the company, which is good for promotions and redoing your resume. And lastly, we have our timestamps, which are updated automatically when your status is changed. When I'm ready to start a task, I'll change the status to pending, and the text will turn green for the task, and a timestamp will be added under task started. Once I complete a task, I'll change the status to done, and the entire row will completely disappear from the task list and move to the bottom of the done tab. And a task completed timestamp will be added, as well as the week that it was completed. Over on our worksheet tab, we have a bunch of pivot tables that our charts are built off of, but these don't update automatically in Excel, so we need to refresh those manually. So I'm going to click on a pivot table, go to pivot table analyze, and then click the little drop down next to refresh and click refresh all. And once we do that, our charts will be up to date, so we can see our task focus broken up by week as well as month, which is good to see what type of task you've been focusing on. You can also see the task priority broken up by week as well as month. And lastly, you can see the task type broken up by week as well as month to give you a great snapshot of what exactly you're focusing on at what time and where those tasks are coming from. And the point of the visualizations tab is for you to be able to quickly see exactly how you're spending your time, make sure you're prioritizing it correctly, and seeing how it evolves over time. On the task list, you can see how many tasks you completed that week, and to update it at the end of the week, all you have to do is change the start date and flip any unplanned tasks to planned tasks. The first thing I'm going to do is select A1 through G1. I'm going to change the background fill color to a dark blue, and then I'm going to change the font color to white, and you can make this whatever color scheme you want. This is just what I'm using. In cell B1, I'm going to type start date colon, and then in D1, I'm going to type completed colon. And just to make things easier to read later on, I'm going to select both B1 and D1 and change the alignment to be on the right side. Next, we're going to put the start date in cell C1. I usually put the date for the Monday, since I work Monday through Friday, but you can do whatever you want based on your schedule. Just make sure it's consistent, that way the charts are accurate. And after I put the date in cell C1, I'm going to change the alignment to left. All right, so now we're going to set up our headers. So I'm going to select cells A2 all the way through K2, and I'm going to change the background color to a lighter blue. And once again, you can use whatever color scheme you want. This is just what I'm doing. All right, now we're going to type out all the headers. So in cell A2, I'm going to put a number sign. To the right of that, I'll put type, then ad hoc tasks. To the right of that in D2, I'll put progress/status, then priority, link, task focus. In H2, I'll put value add. To the right of that, task added. To the right of that, task started. And to the right of that, task completed. And the position of these columns do matter, so you might need to make edits later on if you change the position. The first thing we'll do is select B3 all the way down through the end of column B, then go to Data, Data Tools, use the drop-down to select Data Validation. And in the drop-down under Allow, we're going to type List, and under Source, we're going to type in all of our different options that we want. So I'm going to put planned, comma, unplanned, comma, weekly recurring, comma, monthly recurring, comma, unable to start, comma, and follow-up. And after I hit OK, you can see that the drop-down now exists. I can click on the drop-down and see all the options that we just put. Now we're going to do the same exact thing for status. So I'm going to select D3 all the way through the end of column D, go to Data Validation, select List, and this time we're going to put the options not started, comma, pending, comma, done, comma, next week, and hit OK. And you can use the drop-down to make sure all of your options look right. We'll do the same thing for priority. So we'll select E3 all the way through the end of column E, go back to Data Validation, go back to the List, and this time we're going to put top, comma, high, comma, medium, comma, low, comma, recurring, comma, unable to start, comma, follow-up, and hit OK. Next, we need to add a drop-down for task focus, but before we do, we're going to add a new tab. And then in A1, I'm going to type task focus. And just to separate it visually, I'm going to select A1 all the way through A9, and I'm going to change the background color. And this is where we'll actually type our task focus list instead of inside data validation. So make sure that your list is long enough to hold all your different focuses. And you can choose whatever color you'd like. I'm just updating the background to orange. I'm going to click on A1 and make that bold since it's a header. Now to have some options in my dropdown, I'm going to go ahead and fill in some of the task focuses. So I'll put reporting, tool configuration, and etc. And you can always add more later, so don't worry about having a full list right now. I'm going to go back to sheet 1, then click on cell C3 all the way down to the end of column G. Go back to data, data validation. And we're going to select list just like last time, but this time for source, we're going to select the icon just to the right. And we're going to select sheet 2, cell A2 through A9. And after I click OK, you can see that we have a dropdown that consists of all the different task focuses that we typed. This is called dropdown from a list. And as I mentioned, you can always add more task focuses later. It just has to be within that range. So once I add enablement, you'll see it automatically flow through to the dropdown. So now our dropdowns are complete, but they're missing some color. Unlike Google Sheets, you can't automatically add color when you create your dropdowns, so we need to set up conditional formatting. So I'll select B3 through the end of column B, go to conditional formatting, new rule. Then I want the classic style, and I'm going to put format only cells that contain. I'm going to put cell value is equal to, and just to the right of that, I'm going to put my value. So I'm going to click on the icon, type unplanned, and then press enter. Then I'm going to select the format with value to click custom format, go to the fill tab, and select whatever color I want. I'll do this light blue, then hit OK. Then I'll hit OK again. So now if I use the drop down in column B and click unplanned, you'll see that it turns that light blue color. I'm going to click on conditional formatting, then go to manage rules. Then I'll click duplicate rule and double click into the rule. And now I'm going to change the text, so instead of it saying unplanned, it's going to say planned instead. I'll hit enter, then use the drop down to select custom format again, and then change the color to something different. So I'll select this light orange, then hit OK, and hit OK again. I don't need to click the stop if true, so I'll uncheck that. Then I'll duplicate that rule and click into it. And duplicating the rule just saves a lot of time having to set up a new rule every time. We're going to click on the icon again, and we're going to change planned to weekly recurring. Press enter. Use the drop down to select custom format and change the color again. I'll select this light purple, and then I'll hit OK, and hit OK again. Now the process here is completely repetitive, so I'm going to go ahead and skip to the last one. So for the last one, I'm going to change unable to start to follow up, hit enter, then update custom format, and I'll change the background color to brown instead. I'll hit OK, then hit OK again. Now once you're done, every single option in your dropdown should exist, and you should have a different color for each dropdown. And you can test it out to make sure you didn't forget about everything, so you can select different options to make sure that every single one of them have a color correlated with it. You can click the line between B and C to make it bigger to fit all the text. And then you're going to do the same exact thing for progress/status, priority. And if you want to do it for task focus, you can. I personally don't. So once you're done, it should look something like this with a different color for each option, with task focus optional. The first thing we'll do is right click on row 3 and insert one row above it and put 0 in cell A3. In cell A4, we're going to type the formula if, open parentheses, is blank, open parentheses, C4, close parentheses, comma, quote, quote, comma, max, open parentheses, $A, $3, colon, offset, open parentheses, A4, comma, -1, comma, 0, close parentheses, plus 1, close parentheses. If you did it right, it should be blank until you type text into C4, then it should turn into a 1. If you drag that formula down, you should see that the A3 stays the same, but A4 in the offset formula turns into A5. And if you put text in C5, you should see a number 2 populate. Everything looks good, so we're going to use the fill handle in the bottom right hand corner to drag that formula down all the way down to as far as you want to go. And now we don't need to have row 3 visible, so we can right click on row 3 and click hide. Now I'm going to go ahead and rename our tab, so I'll right click on sheet 1, click rename, and I'm going to rename it task list. Then I'll right click on sheet 2 and rename that as worksheet. And just to the right of that, I'm going to click the plus button to add a new tab. I'll right click on that and rename that as done. And I'm going to drag that over to be in between task list and worksheet. All right, now we're going to build the counter. So back on the task list tab in cell E1, I'm going to type equals count ifs, open parentheses, go to the done tab and select all of column K, comma, quote, greater than or equal to, quote, ampersand, back to the task list and select cell C1, comma, back to the done tab, select all of column K, put a comma, quote, less than or equal to, quote, ampersand, back to the task list and select cell C1, plus 7, close parentheses, and press enter. So what this is saying is if the date listed in column K of the Done tab is greater than or equal to the date listed in C1 and less than 7 days from C1, then it will be counted in the count. And to keep things uniform, I'm going to change the alignment of E1 to left. What I'll do is go to my page and click on beacons.ai, then click Open Anyway. If you want to get the template instead of building it, you can go right to the top. We're going to click on App Scripts Code. And this will bring you to my GitHub directly to my App Scripts folder. But we need VBA instead. So I'm going to click on Sheets by Olin, then go to the repository that says VBA. And once we click VBA, you'll see two different files, one for module and one for task sheet. We're going to use both of those, but we're going to start with module first. So I'll click on that link and then click Copy Code. Then I'm going to go back to my Excel. I'll go to Developer, then VBA, and it'll bring up this page. I'll click on Module, and I'm going to paste the code that we just copied into that module. And you can see up top that it says General. That's the only option. That's perfectly fine. Over to the right side, you can see the name of the module that we created, and that's Move Rows to Done Sheet. That's important to a certain extent because that's going to match with our other code, but you not really need to do anything with that. Alright, so if I try to save this, it's going to say that I can't save it because it's not in the right type of file. So on my Excel, I'm going to hit Save As. In the file format, I'm going to change to Excel Macro Enable Workbook, which is .xlsm. And I'm just going to go to my Mac and save it to my desktop. And you can disregard me fumbling around right here. I don't know why I left this in the video, to be honest, but now I'm doing the voiceover. I'm going to hit OK once I figure everything out. Alright, so now everything's good to go. So I'm going to go back onto the developer, then go to Visual Basic. And don't mind the small screen. It's very hard to work on the small screen, but everything looks good just as we had it. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that. I'm going to click Save. And if you want to, you can double click on Module 1. And you can see that everything is still there, even though it's not visible. I'm going to double click on Sheet 1, which is Task List. And now we're going to go back to my GitHub. I'll click on the VBA to go back to my VBA repository. This time we'll click on the task sheet and click Copy Code. Once the code is copied, we'll go back to our spreadsheet. And now we can go ahead and paste that code inside the window. And if you notice up top, it says Worksheet in the dropdown. That's what we want, to make sure it says Worksheet. And on the right side, it says Change. And that's what we want as well, so make sure it says Change. All right, now I'm going to save everything and exit out of Excel. Then I'm going to open it back up and enable the macros. And now that the macros are enabled, we can test it out. So if I select next week, nothing will happen. If I select not started, a timestamp should appear under task added. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger for us to read. When I select pending, a timestamp will be added under task started. And if you want to resize all the columns at once, you can select all 3 columns, then drag the line. Before we select done, I'm going to add test to the ad hoc task section. And once I select done, the task will completely disappear from this list. And if we go to the done tab, you'll see it right there at the bottom of the list. And just like last time, we need to resize those timestamp columns so we can actually read them. We're going to go back to our task list. And we need to grab some headers. So I'm going to select cells A2 all the way through K2. Copy that, go to our Done tab, and paste that in cell A1. In column L, we have the week that the task was completed, and this pulls from cell C1 in the task list. So I'm going to put the header Start Week for column L. Alright, so now we have it set up where whenever we complete a task, it will automatically move to the bottom of the Done task. And now we need to create some pivot tables. On the Done tab, I'm going to select all of columns A through L, go to Insert Pivot Table, Existing Worksheet, click on the icon to the right, go to our worksheet, and then pick a cell to the right of our table. I'm going to pick C6, but it doesn't fully matter. We just need to have enough room. Once I hit OK, the pivot table fields will open up. I'm going to select Task Focus and drop it under columns. Week Start, drop it under rows. I only want the week start, so I'm going to drag and drop month and days out of that window. Then I'm going to go to the very top and select Ad Hoc Tasks and drop that under Values. Now that's all set up, so I'm going to exit out of the editor. And the drop down right next to row labels, I'm going to uncheck blanks. Now everything looks good with the exception of the grand total. So I'm going to right click on grand total at the bottom and select remove grand total. I'm going to do the same exact thing on the right side. Right click, remove grand total. Now our pivot table is how we want it. So I'm going to go ahead and select the whole pivot table, copy, go several rows to the right. Just make sure you have enough for all the different options once you add more. I'm going to click in any cell in the pivot table, then go to Pivot Table Analyze, Field List. I'm going to drag out Week Start. Then I'm going to drag back in Week Start to the rows. This time I'm going to unselect Days and Week Start so it only leaves months. I'm going to exit out of the editor. And then the drop down right next to column labels, I'm going to uncheck blanks and then exit out. All right, so we're all set with that. Now we're going to go back to the first pivot table, and I'm going to select the entire pivot table all the way over through the second pivot table. Just make sure you have enough to capture all of the data for each. Copy that, go several rows to the right to account for future data, and paste it. We're going to click anywhere into the pivot table, then go to Pivot Table Analyze, Field List. I'm going to remove Task Focus from the columns and put Priority instead. And I'm going to do the same exact thing for the next pivot table. So click on it, Pivot Table Analyze, Field List, drag out Task Focus, drag in Priority. Then we need to redo the blank filter. Now I'm going to select both the last pivot table and the one we just worked on. Copy that, go several rows to the right to account for future data, and paste it. And we're going to do the same exact thing. So I'm going to click into the pivot table analyzed, field list. I'm going to drag out priority and drag in type into columns. Then go to our next pivot table and do the same exact thing. So click on it, go to field list, drag out priority, drag in type, and then reset the blank filter. We're going to click on the pivot table we created, then go to Insert, Pivot Chart. With the chart selected, we're going to go to the menu bar and select Design. And then we'll go to the top left where it says Add Chart Element and go to Axis Titles, Primary Horizontal. We'll delete the default text and change that to Week Start, or you can put whatever you want that makes sense for you. Then we'll go back to Add Chart Element, Axis Title, Primary Vertical. And this time we're going to delete the text and instead write Number of Completed Tasks. Right now, all of our options have bars next to each other in each week, which will get very messy very quickly. So I'm going to go to Change Chart Style, Column, and do a stacked bar chart instead. So now all the options are stacked on top of each other, which is a little bit more sustainable and easier to read. We're going to go back to Add Element, Chart Title, above Chart. And I'm going to rename that as Task Completed by Task Focus, but you can name it whatever you want as long as it makes sense to you. So now your chart's set up, and you need to do this for every single one of your pivot tables that you made. We have 3 for each week, 3 for each month. Then you'll add a new tab called Visualizations and copy and paste them in that tab. And if you decide later on to change what the title is or anything like that, you can always update them later. And make sure to scroll all the way to the right so you don't forget about any pivot tables. All right, so once you're done, you should have something that looks like this. I have all my weeks up top and all my months on the bottom. So I have task focus completed by week, then month, task priority by week, and then month, and type completed by week, and then month. And if you're having trouble configuring the charts, you can always add more data to the Done tab. That way there's more data for you to work with. So now your task tracker is complete and ready to use. So this is what the task tracker looks like. The first thing I do is select the type. So unplanned means I don't know about the task at the beginning of the week. Planned means I do. Weekly, recurring, unable to start, and follow-up are all self-explanatory. Under ad hoc tasks, I provide details around what I need to do for the task to remind myself later on. And then the progress/status always starts with not started. I'll select the priority, so I have top, high, medium, low, unable to start, follow-up, or recurring. And I have the spreadsheet configured where if it's a recurring task, when I mark it as done, it will not be removed from this list. And that's because I want that task to remain for the next week. But if you do want it to be removed, I'll show you how to make that edit in a different video. Next up, I have link, and that's for the project I'm either working on now, or if I need a link to something that gives me more context. Then I have task focus, which is which part of my position this task relates to. And this allows me to see exactly what parts of my job I'm spending the most amount of time. And it's super easy to customize to your position in the Worksheets tab. Under Value Add, you'll put how this task adds value to the company, which is good when you have your annual reviews, when you're looking for a promotion, or when you're dusting off your resume. And then we have a few timestamps. So we have a timestamp under Task Added whenever we added Not Started to our task. And if I update the status to Pending, we'll have another timestamp that appears. And this time it's under Task Started. And the task itself will also turn green. And for all priority types except for recurring, whenever I change the status to Done, it will completely disappear from this list and go to the bottom of the Done tab. And during this process, it also adds a timestamp under Task Completed, and it shows what week this task was completed. And for the week that is completed, it pulls from cell C1, which is the start date, in their task list. In the Worksheets tab, we have a bunch of different pivot tables, and unfortunately, whenever you complete tasks, it doesn't automatically update in Excel like it does in Google Sheets. So we need to manually refresh that. So I'll click into the pivot table, go to Pivot Table Analyze, click on the drop down next to Data, drop down next to Refresh, then click on Refresh All. And it should automatically add the new weeks. If for some reason you don't see them, you can click on the filter and add those weeks manually. Because in reality, we want to see everything except for the blanks. So now that we have the filter the way we want it, I can exit out the editor. And you can see under March 25th, we have one task listed under Improved Efficiency, and that's the one I just completed. Under our Visualizations tab, we have all of our visualizations. So I can see my task focus completed by week as well as month. I can see my task priority by week as well as month. And I can see my type completed by week as well as month. So I can see exactly how I'm spending my time and if that's consistent or changing over time. To set up for a new week, it's super easy. All you have to do is change the start date to the next week. So I usually start on Mondays, but you can start on any day that you want. Next, you need to flip any unplanned tasks to planned tasks since you now know about them at the beginning of the week. And then you'll need to update any of your weekly recurring tasks from done back to not started. And one thing I didn't mention before is that whenever you complete a task and send it to your done tab, it will automatically count how many tasks have been completed that week. And the counter is based off of the date that's input into cell C1. So in this case, it's March 25th. So you can see here I'm filming this on the 23rd, which is not after the 25th, which is why it's not reflected in the completed count. So that's how to use the continuous flow task tracker in Excel and how to update it each week. If you like this video, follow Sheets by Olin for more.